Hey, do you ever wonder if your players secretly hate some of the stuff you do when you're DMing a game of D&D? Well, today, we're going to find out. I found a thread on the RPG subreddit called "What is something you hate when DMs do it?" and it is blowing up with responses. So I thought we'd have a look at the most hated things that DMs do, and maybe even some of the more controversial stuff too. So strap in, we're about to unlock some truths here. All right, but before we look at the best advice, let's look at the most controversial. All right, here we have the most controversial comment in the entire thread. There's nothing worse than protagonization, treating a PC like there's some character in a novel, rather than a real person who actually exists in the world. That's a little bit weird. I'm surprised that this is so controversial. To me, that sounds pretty good. I agree with him. I prefer to play a game and be an actual person with opinions rather than just simply being a protagonist destined to defeating the big evil bad guy and saving the world. That's not the type of game that I like playing. He goes on, along the same lines, asking a player to describe the scene or define something about the setting. This isn't some collaborative storytelling exercise. I am my character. Your job is to describe the world. My job is to explore. Okay, I see where he's gone wrong now. TTRPGs to me are a collaborative storytelling exercise. While I agree that it is sort of the job of a DM to describe the world and then for me to explore it, I think that that's kind of cool. On the other hand, sometimes the game is just a lot more fun if I can ask the DM, is it possible that I can jump out of the balcony and slide down the banisters? Those things might not have been described by the DM or even existed in the DM's head before I asked if I could do such a thing, but hey, it would be a lot cooler if I could. Also, there's lots of different games. Not every game is D&D. A game like Powered by the Apocalypse is explicitly about collaborative storytelling. All right, extremely controversial comment here. One that I'm guilty of, and I think a lot of other people are too. Expecting or relying upon me to have the same interest and fascination for the setting that they do. Okay guys, let's be honest, I think we all fall victim to this a little. Which makes sense, DMs tend to be extremely passionate about the settings. They have to be passionate about their games if they want to run them. It's very labor intensive, really time intensive to run a game. It makes total sense to me that they would be the most passionate about their settings. However, that does not translate to players, nor should it. I don't think that we should expect that from players. Remember, players don't tend to tell anecdotes about your world building or your lore. They tend to tell anecdotes about the exploits of their group and of their character. That's the thing that they're most passionate about. I think that's always important, really valuable to remember. This commenter says, one specific situation I was in a few years ago, the DM wrote the characters he wanted us all to play. I think that that could 100% be frustrating for a lot of your average games where you're just playing adventurers, kicking in doors, and killing kobolds for loot. Yeah, that could be annoying. I kind of want to try out new builds. I want to try out different types of characters. I want to try different classes. However, there are a lot of games where this works really, really well. One of the best examples being my favorite scenario of all time, which is called In Media Res, and it's for Call of Cthulhu. And in that scenario, it is explicitly designed to be about a group of characters who are all pre-built and they all have their own psychologies, and the actual action of that scenario is just watching how those different personalities interact with one another. That is super exciting. Likewise, if you're running like a convention game, I totally get it. Just make pre-made characters rather than having to go through character creation, because that can take time. That can take time. Oh no, another one I'm really guilty of. This commenter says, not forecasting consequences. I know the whole "are you sure" thing is basically a meme at this point, but it's actually just kind of bad DMing. Most of the time, if a player is attempting something that will have a bad result, it's because the DM has failed to make the situation as clear to the players as it would be to the characters. Letting the PCs unknowingly do something dumb is just okay, so I'm totally guilty of this one. I kind of disagree with the premise of this comment though. I think sometimes player characters will do things that are obviously bad, but that they still do them. For example, I've had characters find potions inside dungeons and not know what they are, but just have a drink of them to see what happens. To me, that is obviously a bad idea. That could be a bottle of acid. So I have to ask, are you sure that you want to do that? But lots of characters are like, yeah, hell yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. I think that's fine. I don't want to intrude on their agency by telling them, no, your character would not do that. So I think we sometimes have to be really careful of how we deploy this. Also, sometimes it can be impressive how divorced from reality a player is, because I could not foresee that they thought something would go any other way. So yeah, sometimes you just can't account for what's going on in the player's head. Very interesting one here. God, the reluctance to level up or even the weird hostility towards progressing drives me insane. I see it a lot online, I haven't experienced it in person. It's why I dislike milestone leveling so much. I think this is all extremely interesting. Personally, I've got a couple of friends who just will not play anything but milestone leveling for sure. I think that milestone leveling is super important to the game because it allows people to level up when it's especially dramatic. And for a lot of our games, we're just looking for a little bit of drama. And leveling up using XP and counting up how much XP each monster gives when you kill it, that can be a little bit labor intensive, a lot of bookkeeping that people just don't enjoy. Honestly though, I don't think I've ever really seen this before, people being reluctant to allow level ups. In fact, quite the opposite. I find that whenever I get into milestone games, those DMs tend to give out level ups like they're going out of style. Often, I'm surprised at the rate of leveling up. This commenter says they hate long board text where players are considered rude for attempting to interact with something in it before it's fully stated. I totally get this. This is basically where the DM just gets this kind of paragraph of text that they have to read and they just laboriously read through it. I really struggle with this. I don't have a great attention span, so that means that I'm gonna miss things very quickly and very easily. Whenever you say something and it triggers something in my brain, I wanna start asking questions about that thing immediately. I hate these long box texts in games. I definitely think this should be a little bit of a faux pas. I don't like adventures that put them in games either. I think these are done sometimes for drama. I find them like the opposite of dramatic. I find them kind of laborious. Better off to just allow the DM to read this information and then distribute it to the party as they see fit. This commenter says, what I hate when DMs use too much Underdark and dry content. Incorrect. Totally wrong. Not enough dry content out there. This is the worst comment. Should be the most controversial. Okay, here's another one that I kind of disagree with. This commenter says, I absolutely loathe sessions with no mechanical interactions. Some people gush and go on about how they played the best session ever and didn't even roll once, but that's my hell. Nothing kills my immersion faster than sitting around and realizing we're just a group of nerds speaking in accents. Let me roll the dice, let me use my stats, let me interact with the game. So I do disagree with this. This is actually, some of my favorite sessions have been sessions where literally I've been engaged in debates or discussions in character with another character. I live for that role play, but then I'm kind of a failed theater kid, so right, that's the vibe that I'm into. I totally get it though, that if you're playing a game like Pathfinder or Dungeons and Dragons, where a lot of the gameplay loop is all about just getting into dungeons, fighting monsters, doing combat, how that could be a very frustrating experience for you. So I totally understand that. I feel like this is one of those scenarios where there are player expectations and DM expectations, and they're not meeting in the middle, and that is where things have gone wrong. In fact, I think that's probably true of most of these comments. This commenter says, this one is probably unique to my introverted disposition, but I don't like it when GMs don't spotlight specific PCs. I'm very self-conscious about talking over other players, so it helps when GMs describe a situation and then ask specific PCs what they want to do. GMs who don't pay attention to pacing drive me crazy. I prefer GMs who will make the directorial decisions to cut straight to the action instead of making me roleplay the entire drive to the scene. I think that this definitely does depend on the game, but I do feel like pacing is actually one of those things that we're all responsible for sure. Spotlighting as a DM can be really difficult in my opinion. I will often try to spotlight certain PCs. I'll sometimes even present scenarios that I think will be a challenge for certain PCs that I think they can engage with really well, or when they're alone, you know, we might do a little bit of spotlighting on that character, and I'll try to give everybody a little bit of an opportunity to have a time to shine. But 9 times out of 10, for most of a session, I'm gonna be leaving it to the players to determine that sort of stuff. Unfortunately, I feel like role-playing is just one of those activities where extroverted people just have a little bit of a leg up. As much as I can try and create space and ask people what they think specifically, as a DM, I can only manage that so much, in my opinion. But maybe I'm wrong there. Let me know in the comments below. This could be a blind spot for me. Okay, this commenter says something that actually does speak to me a little bit. I kind of disagree with them, but let me explain. So they say, redescribing the actions of my character before moving on to the next player. If I wanted to go into that much detail about how my character swung their sword, I would have done so. This actually frustrates me as well. So I do agree with this commenter, but kind of from the opposite angle. I like to describe the things that my character does, and it frustrates me when the DM describes what my character does to a very in-depth, noodly kind of degree, when they really zoom in on it, because really, to be honest, oftentimes how I describe the actions that I take, that is to me a part of role-playing as the character. And so the DM essentially describing how I do things can sometimes feel like they're taking away from my role play. But it's not a big deal. Sometimes I'll just say, oh no, I wouldn't do it like that, I'll do it like this. This commenter comes in with the hot take that I totally agree with. Some really good DM advice here. A little bit of railroading is expected with most games. The GM has an adventure planned, and unless the players engage with the adventure, there is no adventure. That said, my issue is when a games master wastes my time, especially via red herrings. So for those who don't know, red herrings are essentially where, say there is a mystery and you're trying to find out who the murderer is, there is a red herring, some sort of series of clues that lead you towards the wrong killer. Someone who didn't actually do the murder, but there's a lot of evidence that points that way, and so you have to kind of exhaust the evidence there, and you're led down the wrong way. I think that this is actually a massive mistake for the vast majority of games. One of the things that we have to remember as a DM is that our players do not have access to the same amount of information as we do, and something that seems very obvious to a DM ain't so obvious to players. I've seen players get confused over what I thought was an extremely obvious puzzle or an extremely obvious mystery. They just get confused, they end up going in the wrong direction, and I'm like, how did you not see that? When you don't know the answer to something, it is not obvious at all. And red herrings just confuse this and create a lot of problems in a game. I would advise every DM, especially if you're running a mystery game, never ever use red herrings. They will just make the game a little bit more of a miserable experience, honest. Unless your players are like really good, like really good, like really good, which no offense to players out there, I think most aren't. Okay, that's enough of the controversial though. Let's look at some of the top voted comments for what is the worst things that a DM can do. Okay, this one is really heavily upvoted. Most people agree that this is something that DMs really should not do. And this commenter says, this is difficult to distill to a simple sentence, but the essence is that I had a GM that would balance their encounters round to round. It wasn't an enemy with 200 HP. It was an enemy that would last 3 rounds. If we did 200 damage to it in those 3 rounds, it died. If we did 100 damage to it in those 3 rounds, it died. If we did 1000 damage to it in round 1, it survived. Its friends that just took 100 damage would miraculously die in round 4 or whatever. Yeah, this sounds extremely frustrating. It's very similar to fudging dice, honestly. It really feels very similar. Fudging dice is essentially lying to your players. It's when you roll a die and then you lie about the result of that, because if it went the way that the dice actually rolled, that might not be good for the party, or it might not be fun for the session, or for whatever reason. Maybe you turn what would be a crit that would kill somebody into a miss, thereby making sure that somebody's most favorite character ever does not die. This, what we're gonna call is heated DM action, is on the same spectrum as that. I guess where this differs from fudging dice though is that dice fudging is typically used to balance an encounter. Maybe the DM set it up so that it ended up being way more deadly than they anticipated, and they're like, oh my god, I'm gonna murder all my players by accident. I'm gonna fudge some dice rolls here to make sure that nobody dies, or that I haven't screwed up the entire balance of the session. This, however, is done with intentionality. The DM has set out, okay, in round 4, the players win. That's not great. That's essentially like being in the scene of a play. Theater can be fun. Being in the scene of a play can be fun, but everybody has to be on board with that. And if it's less fun when everybody finds out about it, I think that a DM should always rethink whether or not they should do something. As the commenter goes on to say, before we noticed, it felt good, but every single comment would run the same way, and when the illusion subsided, we were just left feeling like nothing we did mattered. Yeah, it just removes player agency, and I think that DMs have to really consider, whenever they're doing anything that removes player agency, whether or not it's worth it. This commenter says, I set up Foundry with a giant fucking boss bar for enemy HP. You'd think it might be video gaming and break immersion, but it actually was awesome for them to hit a monster and go, oh shit, that really hurt it. Sometimes they slaughtered their enemies fast, sometimes a combat went south and they were sweating. The variety added a lot of spice. Granted, I had almost no control over combats, which would be easy, which would be hard, but the thing is, I like to be surprised. I agree and disagree with this commenter. I kind of hate video gaming elements in TTRPGs. I get that a lot of people really enjoy them though. I think it's just a taste thing. But I do think that being open about combat, open about dice rolls, does add a little bit of spice to a game that is very exciting, especially in combat games. Sometimes you just want to play without the safety of a net. On the other side though, this upvoted comment says, balancing every encounter to be challenging. Some GMs make every fight hard, every social encounter a battle of wits, and every track grueling. It feels like the whole world is getting more challenging as the PCs get better. Pits The level 12 heroes against 7 goblins. Let the bard overawe someone. Attack 2 Jedi with a squad of battle droids. Have the superhero be super. Otherwise, perspective is lost. Ooh, this is like a tough one for me. I actually agree and disagree here. I think it depends on the game. If I'm playing a superhero game, hell yeah, I want to beat up goons. If I'm playing a game where I'm like the Jedi, yeah, killing battle droids is part of the fun. When I'm playing an adventure or combat game though, especially one that's about dungeon delving, I actually do prefer it when the game skews towards deadly. I feel like every game is gonna be a little bit different. Sometimes I'm in the mood for one thing and sometimes I'm in the mood for the other. I'm not always in the mood for everything, but as a general rule, I like my sessions to matter. I like whenever I'm a player to be in a session, I like for the things I do in that to really, really matter. Fighting 7 goblins as like a level 20 is just not gonna be super fun because it's trivial. And I don't really like trivial encounters unless it's adding something to the game. I don't play D&D for a power fantasy, I play a superhero game for that. So I feel like it just depends what you're looking for. If you're in this for power fantasies, then hell yeah. Beating like a bunch of goblins like it's nothing, yeah, why not? As always, player expectations, DM expectations, you gotta touch in the middle. And this one is super interesting. This commenter says, the least fun I've ever had in a game due to GM decisions was extended survival scenarios where you're stuck in a cycle of rolling checks each day to meet basic survival needs, and there's no additional time to advance the plot. I kind of agree and disagree with this one. I have a friend who runs games and they really love these survival scenarios. I don't mind them. I think I'm pretty neutral on them. I don't get excited by them, but I don't hate them either. I have, however, been in a game where a player almost died from exposure, and that was interesting. I will say that much, and we would have only gotten to that situation because we had to make a series of rolls and survive them. This seems to be like a really popular thing that is done though in games, and I don't really get it because it isn't super dramatic to me. It's not super exciting either, but I wouldn't put it as like my pet peeve. I'm just super neutral on it. However, this one, I do totally agree with the commenter because I hate this so much. Overpowered GMPC shows up and bosses the party around. Okay, you might hate me for saying this, but there is a time and a place for this. Namely speaking, if you want the party to hate somebody and turn against somebody, do not make them just evil. Don't make them like an evil quest giver. Just make them an obnoxious quest giver. Somebody who's walking around, bossing everybody about. Maybe preening their giant feathered cap, being super duper obnoxious to players, and being incompetent as well. Players hate incompetence. That is how you create a ton of friction and have the players turn on an NPC. It may not be fun for the party at first, but boy, it can result in a lot of really fun stories. And now we come to the comment that is the biggest pet peeve for me personally. This commenter says, telling me how my character feels about the situation. That's my part. Unless it's something that takes my control away, like character being terrified, leave this to me. This 100%. I am role-playing my character. I detest it when the DM tells me how my character feels. No, my character will feel however they feel, because that is actually my job as a player, to try and figure out how I'm going to roleplay in this situation. Unless it's like a magical effect, I can't be hacking this, guys. I cannot be hacking this. This is probably my biggest pet peeve because it happens to me all the time. But what do you think? Do you disagree with that? Let me know in the comments below. And check out this video if you want to learn about why the new DMs guide is probably going to be creating a lot of really bad DMs. And if you enjoyed this content, please do check out my Patreon at patreon.com/discoursminiatures. There you get access to bonus videos, live streams, and even secret Discord rooms where you can chat personally with me. And as always, a huge thanks to my patrons, especially Sonic Bread, Crypto Kev, Novani, and Mistress Arby. Thank you so much, guys, and I'll catch y'all next time. Bye-bye!